evening. Today is Tuesday, September 12th. Time is 6:30, and I'd like to call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Can I have a roll call, please?
Delory.
Here.
Mata.
Here.
Stiegel.
Here.
Onken. Shield.
Here.
James. Serrata.
Here. And we have a quorum. At this point, I'd like to say welcome to our new members. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your volunteering.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to item 3, minutes. Item 3A, Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes for the joint meeting and the special called meeting on August 29th, 2023. We require a motion and a second to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
So we have a motion from Commissioner Mata and a second from Commissioner Stiegel to approve the minutes. Now we'll vote on the matter. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against, say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Minutes are approved.
And one abstention,
An abstention?
because I wasn't here.
Okay. And one abstention. Thank you. Item 4, citizen comments. Item 4A, citizen comment period. The Planning and Zoning Commission welcomes comments from citizens early in the agenda for regular meetings. Speakers are provided with an opportunity to speak during this time period on any agenda item or any matter concerning city business, but I would ask you to observe the 3-minute time limit. I think tonight we have Alex Guerra. Mr. Guerra.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Alex Guerra. I am a former resident and former commissioner on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I just want to thank you for what you guys do for our city. Thank you for your dedication. I very much want to congratulate both Vice Chair Delory and Madam Chair Onken for their appointments. It is well deserved, and you all have shown great dedication to your roles here. Thank you to everyone for giving to the city. Thank you for the work you continue to do on the comp plan and how it's going to affect the future of our city. I also want to thank both Tracy Shield and Daniel Serrano for your willingness to serve our city. There is a lot to be done, and I expect very good things from you all going forward. Thank you all for what you do.
Thank you, Alex. That's very gracious of you. Is there any other citizen comments at this time? All right, moving on. Item number 5, work session number 5A, presentation and discussion on statutes and regulations applicable to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the role and responsibilities. At this time, I'm going to ask Mr. Will Atkinson, Director of Planning, to kick off this work session.
All right, Will Atkinson, Director of Planning for the record. As we have a couple of new faces on the commission, and we haven't really had much training over the past year or so, staff and administration figured it was a good time to provide some training. So what this training is mostly going to cover tonight is related to what both state law, the city charter, and our code allows for the Planning and Zoning Commission to attend to when items come to y'all, things you have to consider, just general rules of housekeeping and what have you in the Open Meetings Act. So I'm going to go through a first few slides, and then Paige, our legal counsel, is going to take over the rest from there. So. All right, so the Planning and Zoning Commission from a state requirement perspective is in primarily Chapter 211 and Chapter 212 per state law. Section 211.007 for the Zoning Commission requires review and a vote of zoning recommendations, which is what y'all see when a zoning or rezoning application comes to y'all, whether it's part of straight zoning or a planned unit development. Section 212.006 grants you all the authority to be responsible for approval generally relating to major plats and preliminary plans. So when a subdivision is being proposed, staff reviews it for compliance, and we bring it to y'all to make sure that y'all are approving it as the approval body. And y'all will see that from time to time. There's even a couple of plats on the agenda tonight. And then Section 212.0065 is the delegation of approval of responsibility. This is a new law that just passed this year where the governing body may delegate responsibility of plat approval to municipal employees. Is what it boils down to. So that's not currently what our code says, but there's multiple new laws that have come into play, and we are looking at those for just maybe looking at updating our code and what have you. We may look at this section specifically, we may not. We haven't really decided yet, but I just want to make sure that y'all are aware that it's on our radar at the same time. In the city charter, in section 2-68, from an overview of the Planning and Zoning Commission, members must reside in the city of Kyle, inside the city limits, for at least 6 months. And we have to have a minimum of 5 members with a maximum of 7 members required. We do, from a practical perspective, like having a fully seated commission. It gets complicated really fast if we're not fully seated, and when we need majority votes and what have you. So being fully staffed is good from this perspective. And then in section 2-69, it's a minimum of a 2-year appointment with alternating terms every other year for elections. And if you go to the city planning website, it shows who's on the board or who's on the commission. It shows when their seat was established and when their appointment is ending as well. All right, and then there's some additional portions of the charter. And here we go. All right, so, and this part gets really wordy, so I apologize. You can ask if you're driving through town and you see like a site that's under construction or an area that you have concerns with, you can ask the city manager to have an inspection for the site, and we can look at that and see if there's anything that needs to be accounted for. Review, monitor, oversee, and make recommendations to the city manager and city council for adjustments to the comprehensive plan, which is our document that's the foundation of how development occurs inside the city. Which is a big deal right now because we are in the process of wrapping that up over the next month and a half, and to pretty much have a new plan. So it's a very important aspect of this. Also review, monitor, and oversee, make recommendations for zonings, which I previously mentioned. These are recommendations to the city council. City council is ultimately the body that does approve or does not approve zoning recommendations. Per our charter, exercising all the powers of the commission as to approval or disapproval of plans, plats, replats, vacation plans, plats, replats, and what have you for proper subdivision. And also study and make recommendations on the location, extension, planning, etc. for public right-of-way, parks, and other public spaces as requested by the city manager or the city council. Additional duties, there's quite a few of these, so just bear with me. Study and make recommendations concerning the capital improvements program, including design, construction, and general location of viaducts, fixtures for the streets, other structures and appurtenances, and make recommendations on design or alteration when it comes to city property for art. Initiate in the name of the city as requested by the city manager or the city council proposals for the opening, vacating, or closing of public right-of-way, public spaces, the original zoning of annexed areas, and for the change of zoning district boundaries on an area-wide basis. Number 8, review, monitor, oversee, and make recommendations to the city council and city manager policies and regulations consistent with the adopted plans governing the location or operation of utilities, public facilities, or other areas serviced or under the control of the city. Make recommendations to the city council and city manager regarding annexation. Making sure y'all are up to date in the references to the progress of urban planning in the United States and other countries, making associated recommended improvements to the city in terms of code. Exercise the authority and perform the duties provided by state law and the city charter, and as it relates to city planning. And you may submit an annual report to the city manager and council each October, summarizing the activities, accomplishments, and everything else related to that for the coming year. All right, and then just as a summary of this, the biggest things that we primarily see here at the Planning and Zoning Commission, we review and provide comprehensive plan recommendations to the City Council. That can be in terms of a full rewrite like we're going through right now, or it could be sub-areas of the city in terms of, for example, like the downtown master plan, or if someone's asking for a comprehensive plan amendment for a specific portion of the city. Review and provide zoning-based recommendations to the City Council. And for example, if they want to rezone the property from residential to retail, we make a recommendation, we provide a staff report, and we go from there. Approve preliminary and final plats for subdivisions. Preliminary plans show the entire property and that's going to be subdivided with higher level lotting, where the streets are, water, wastewater, et cetera, and parks. And then final plats usually come down to sections of that preliminary plan. And then the approval of conditional use permits. There's two in this case, and we'll go into further detail in a little bit later. But the primary one that we see is for elevation approval for commercial permits. We have 7 different overlay districts, and we want to make sure that the city is as beautiful as we can make it. The other conditional use permit is actually a public hearing-based one as it relates to specific uses and even height exceptions as well. We do see from time to time, but it's not common. And some basic do's and don'ts. Most of these are just about being polite and what have you, and I don't anticipate it's ever going to be an issue, but from time to time it does happen. So make sure we allow speakers, when they have their time to speak uninterrupted. Make sure that any questions, concerns, discussions, motions, and votes have to make sure that they're relevant to the item at hand within state law and city regulations. When seated at the dais, all discussion must be audible for recording minutes. So please don't whisper or have any secret communication. Don't talk behind your hand and all that kind of stuff. And also be respectful to speakers presenting. No eye rolling, scrolling on mobile devices, etc., and what have you. So again, I haven't had this happen on the commission. But
It's not going to happen tonight.
good. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Paige.
Board Chair Commission, my name is Paige Sines. I'm the city attorney. I'm here to cover the second part of the training governing, addressing certain laws that govern you, Open Meetings Act, Public Information Act, some conflicts of interest, and they'll just go into a little bit more detail on some of the planning regulations and nuances that will come into play as you're serving as planning and zoning. If we can go to I want to skip ahead to the discretionary versus ministerial, so that would be the.
Paige, can I ask you
Yes.
if we can interrupt you with questions, or would you rather us save till the end?
No, you can ask
Okay,
questions
thanks.
as we go. And so I want to go a little bit more into the kind of the planning function, and then we'll go into Open Meetings Act, public information, and conflicts of interest. Will gave you a good overview of the state law and city charter governing you. You have, in addition to that, you have the comprehensive plan and the zoning ordinance. You are, most of what y'all is going to come before y'all are zoning related cases, comprehensive plan amendments, and plating type cases. The comprehensive plan is the big picture plan for the city, and it contains land uses, future land uses that show in general what various areas of the city should be used for as the city grows and develops. It shows existing uses as well. It shows proposed changes in uses. It also includes major infrastructure that would go into place to support those land uses, such as roads, water, wastewater utilities. Those are things that the comprehensive plan governs, and that's the big picture planning document. And then what comes out of that is the zoning ordinance, which is the document that establishes what are the different zoning districts, what are the land uses within those districts, and what are the different development standards that may apply in those districts. In addition, and then you have the subdivision ordinance, which says, how do we get infrastructure? How do we build infrastructure to serve this land? And what are the requirements for roads? And what are the requirements for utilities? And when we divide up land, how do we make sure we've got roads and utilities to all these lots? And so that's how all that fits together. The zoning matters that come before you are going to be I guess I'll go with three types. One is amendments to the zoning ordinance. So you have a role to play in what do the zoning regulations, what do these land use regulations look like for the community. And then you have particular zoning cases that come forward where someone is asking, I want to change my land use, and I'm proposing to change it from a certain use such as agriculture to retail, or from retail to multifamily. And that will come before you, and you'll review that request. And then the conditional use permits, which are the two type, which is what do the buildings look like, and or what use is on this. It kind of drills down into the use on the property. With respect to zoning, so there's a concept of ministerial versus discretionary. In some cases, the P&Z, and it's the same for the council, you have an option to approve or disapprove. And some decisions that come before you, you do not have discretion. You're just more of an oversight body that's, I hate to use the word rubber stamp, but that's a way to think of it. You're just stamping approval because that's what state law and the ordinances say you do. So subdivision plats, those are ministerial. That means that if the plat that comes before you, this proposed division of land with all the different roads and utilities, the layout of the land, if that comes before you and it complies with state law and city ordinances, you have to approve it. You do not have discretion. It is something to be aware of because sometimes there's tension of, I don't like this, I don't like how it looks, I have concerns about it, or members of the public come and they are expressing disagreement or concerns about the proposed development. And it puts you in a tough position, which is you have to approve it if it complies with state law. And that, try to explain that to the public, but sometimes I've heard the term pain sponge recently. You might be a little bit of a pain sponge. You're hearing the comments, you're taking that in, you're hearing those concerns, but in those types of cases, you can't do a whole lot about it.
Paige,
Yes.
I have a question. So we have no say if it's a residential subdivision, and say it's all the homes are 40-foot lots, and it doesn't seem to really be able to support that density, and so we can't say we'd rather have all these the homes have 50-foot lots, so we can't change that.
When it comes to you for a plating approval, it's too late at that point.
It's too late, okay.
You have to approve it.
Okay,
And
so
that's-
hopefully we would have been able to change that at an earlier step. Okay.
The earlier steps would be, first of all, the comprehensive plan, which is set, it gets changed every 5 years, or more, just depending on what's going on in the world. And then after that are the zoning regulations, which set out, what are the zoning regulations set out setbacks and lot sizes and those types of things for the various districts. And so that's a set of regulations that both the council and the P&Z have some discretion over. Then you have the individual zoning case that comes before you. And that zoning case was where you decide, are we going to agree to the land use should change or not? And at that point, after all those decisions have been made, then when you get the plat before you, where they're actually laying out the property, you're just approving it. There's no discretion there. Where you have discretion are the zoning cases and the comprehensive plan amendments. So when someone brings a zoning case before you to change land use, the first question should be, does it comply with the comprehensive plan? Because like I said, the comprehensive plan is your master plan, it's your guide, and so everything flows from that. And when someone brings a zoning case before you, the first question is, does the proposed rezoning comply with the comprehensive plan? Does it match the proposed land use we have in this comprehensive plan? And if it does not, you can't approve it unless you amend the comprehensive plan. And so at some point, there may be a time where the comprehensive things change, and that's why you have to review that comprehensive plan every once in a while. And so if you start to see, in connection with zoning cases, if you start to see comprehensive plan amendments and they're happening more frequently, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with the comprehensive plan. It just may mean that things have changed to the point it's time to look at it again. But the staff will review and they'll make recommendations. They'll review these applications that come before you and they'll make recommendations and they'll tell you, for the subdivision plats, it complies, it does not. So that's pretty straightforward. On the zoning cases, you'll get that analysis from staff as well, which is complies with the comprehensive plan, or it does not, or it does not comply with the comprehensive plan, but we have an amendment coming at the same time. And then staff will give you recommendations as well for you to consider. So that'll be the framework that you, and the support and foundation you have to make your decisions. And we're talking about a lot of information here today. This is an ongoing learning experience. Every time you have a case, every time you make a decision, you're learning and getting better, and you should always ask questions and make sure you have the information you need to make the decision. But there's not an expectation that you kind of remember everything. This is to give you a foundation so that you can continue to learn. Back to the subdivision, one exception there is if somebody's requesting a variance. So a variance is, I want an exception to the rule, is what it means. If someone needs an exception to the rule to build their property the way they develop their property the way they want to, they have to request a variance, and you have discretion with that. So that's an exception, and that will be in your staff report, which is they're requesting a variance, so you can choose to approve it or not. And sometimes if you don't approve it, they can't develop as proposed, and they have to just go back to the drawing board and kind of try to solve that problem. On the zoning cases, kind of areas to danger zones to be aware of. So you have discretion. That means you're going to be hearing from staff. You'll be hearing from the developer, the property owner. You may hear from the public as well. The public gets notice about a particular zoning case. They get individual mailed notice. Everybody within 200 feet is going to get notice of that zoning case, and they may like it, which if they like it, they don't tend to show up. If they don't like it, they will show up, and or they will do written correspondence. So when you do when you change the zoning rules, there's not individual notice right now. There will be some as we go forward. Yeah. So you will have a lot of information at your disposal when those cases come forward, and some areas to watch out for. So when you make decisions about zoning, it's supposed to be for the health, safety, morals, welfare of the community. It can't be arbitrary and capricious. It can't just be kind of random and have no real basis or support in the decision you're making. And so these are kind of amorphous terms these are things that come from the statutes and the courts, and they're amorphous. And so what do these words mean? And this is where kind of the actual facts that are before you and some of the case law help us out. But your guiding documents are going to be your comprehensive plan, the policies that the city sets, which are that comprehensive plan, the zoning ordinances, any kind of workshopping you do with the council where you have visions of how the P&Z works together with the council on making these decisions and shaping the city. Those are the types of things that kind of support that analysis when you're making your decisions. A few areas to stay away from, obviously, are going to be avoiding discrimination type issues. So discrimination on the basis of race it used to be more prevalent. You don't really see that now, but obviously you can't zone in a way that's discriminatory based on a protected class. There are certain, fair housing is another. People have a right to have certain uses within the community that provide fair housing for people. So if someone wants to put a group home, for example, in certain districts, they're going to have certain protections. And so I'm just kind of flagging these, but there will be additional support for you as these cases come before you.
Paige, I've got a question. The only,
Yes.
what you might call discriminatory communities I've seen recently is age-based ones, so 55 and older or something. What's the legality of that, or is that enforceable? How does that work?
I haven't gotten into a lot of that area of the law. I don't know if that comes from it's like Sun City, I guess, is an example of that. And so some of that may be private deed restrictions, and the city doesn't really get into that. When the city has to make that regulation, that's when you get into those protected areas, because the government can't do certain things, private entities can do more of that. So I don't know the answer to that question specifically from a governmental standpoint. There's some limitations on defining like who can live together, what's a family, when you start to deal with density and how many people can live in a household. There's some limitations on that, defining that, and in those cases you're just trying to deal with, we don't want too many people in one house because it's just a public safety type issue. It's a crowding and public health issue. As long as you don't get into, what's a family, you have to be related, those types of things. You get the frat house, I guess, is what you think of when you think of have so many people in one building. But I don't know the answer on the age, and if that's something we could get more information on, if it's something that's P&Z is going to be dealing with. So a couple other points on the zoning side, and then if you have any more questions, I'll answer them, and then other than that, we'll jump over to the statutes that govern how you conduct yourselves. Contract zoning is where you agree in writing to zone property in a certain way. It's like a written agreement, or I'll agree to zone you a certain way if you do X, Y, Z, and you enter an agreement. That's contract zoning. It's not allowed. It takes away the legislative authority of the council to make those decisions. Now, you may get agreements. You may get some circumstances where you have a zoning case come before you, and you're going to be told there's a development agreement that says they can do this land use. And that happens when they were out in the ETJ, because you can enter an agreement about land use in the ETJ, and then when they come in, you try to get the zoning to match the land use, so that there's less confusion about how do you process all these development applications. Spot zoning, if you hear someone kind of bring that up, spot zoning, that is, if someone says something is spot zoning, really where it could be spot zoning, a slam dunk case is if you're zoning in a way that's not consistent or doesn't match the comprehensive plan. If the proposed zoning matches the comprehensive plan, don't worry so much about a spot zoning claim. That may come from someone who doesn't like the proposed zoning. But it's such a facts and circumstances determination of whether it's spot zoning or not. You're not going to be able to really answer that question at your level or the city council level. But you have protection when you zone consistent with the comprehensive plan. And then downzoning is if you, and this can happen if you adopt a regulation or you change property use, and that is if somebody had an expectation of certain uses on their property, and then the city changes that use in such a way that they lose some of those use options, that is a legal issue for the city. Someone could say, you're taking my property, you need to compensate me because I can't use it the way I was expecting to be able to use it. And I put that out there. If it gets raised, we'll have to just kind of analyze it and deal with it. But the staff's process for taking applications and reviewing them and bringing them forward, and their process for bringing forward zoning regulations reduces a lot of that risk, and they vet those issues before it gets to you. So, were there any other questions about the zoning? Yes.
And from my remembrance from before, if somebody wanted to zone, say, an area retail, we're only looking at the zoning of retail, not the different individual types of categories of businesses that can fall under that. So in other words, they want to come up and say, they want to be retail. We can only look at retail. We cannot say, oh, but you're a liquor store. We don't want a liquor store there. Correct?
You're supposed to look what is the highest and best use for that property
Okay.
and make a decision on that basis. And that information is in front of you. Be aware that whenever someone zones to the retail services, they've got that whole list of uses there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means regardless of what they're saying they may bring, all those options are on the table. And that's something to consider. Are any of these uses appropriate for this area? And if you don't think they are, then you don't recommend approval. If you think that this particular category of zoning is appropriate, then you would make a recommendation for approval. But if you don't, then you'd recommend disapproval. If, the comprehensive plan, I'm not sure if it gets into that level of detail where it says this is going to be RS or this is just kind of a commercial area. If the comprehensive plan is a clue as to what were the planned uses for this. If you, as the P&Z, are having concerns about the types of uses that could go there and that are coming forward for approval, I think that's a signal for some study on the issue, a study of the comprehensive plan.
Yes. I have a question about planned unit development. We had a case
Yes.
not so long ago where the PUD was approved 12 years ago,
Okay.
and it came back through here requesting actually a retail warehouse, which a warehouse would have been included under, I think, the zoning at the time. But the question in my mind was, how long do these PUDs exist? I called it a zombie PUD. 12 years old. And it was supposed to be mixed use, is my understanding in my research.
They're blue zone PUDs. They can live to be 100 years old. I'm kidding. The blue zones where they live to be 100 years old. There's not an expiration date. There's generally not an expiration date. The purpose of the zoning is to give people assurance of what land uses are authorized, and they're making an investment in, I can build this project. It may take many years to build. It could take up to 30 years to build. And so 12 years there's not an expiration date usually, and it doesn't change until either the landowner requests a change or the city initiates zoning and makes a change.
So an investor could get it designated a PUD. It could sit there 12 years. They flip it once or twice because the value of a PUD, relatively speaking, to other constraints, it's more favorable designation. So they can flip that just on the basis it's a PUD. Is there any point at which indeed the city can come in and say, no, there's not an expiration date, but we can't approve of the use that's proposed at this time?
if someone comes forward with an amendment to the PUD, it's within your discretion to approve it or deny it. There needs to be a reasonable basis for that. And if it is, we don't believe that that is the best use for the property, what you're proposing is this change, that we disapprove, recommend disapproval, or it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan, recommend disapproval. Is that answering the question?
More or less, but I see a little bit of, you might say, a hustle in being able to do that and get the designation, and then it just sit on your investment for years and sell it as a PUD, and the value of the land is partly that it's a PUD that's been previously approved. I mean, 12 years is a long, long time. The city's grown a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. The PUDs, there can be a benefit to the PUD when you have a zoning district that doesn't just quite fit in, and they want to have more of a master planned community that has a multitude of uses, and maybe removes some of the authorized uses from districts and adds some, kind of mixes and matches. It's more of a custom zoning district. And you can get a lot more detail about what the project is going to look like. But what you're talking about is something good to keep in mind when a PUD comes before you, because you never know what's going to happen with the investor, the economy, or the property owner. And so you're not just thinking about what is this person going to do? Is this person going to fulfill this project? Is that proposed land use, is that in the best interest of the city? Is that consistent with comprehensive plan? Is that consistent with good land use? Is that the highest and best use of that land? And whether it be this developer or a future one, does this make sense for the city for zoning in that case? The reality is, businesses fail, the economy turns, and those can't be controlled, and you can't foresee that. So you make the best decision you can with the information you have on hand at the time you make the decision, keeping in mind all those possibilities of what could happen. But you can only do with what you've got in front of you. If in the future that happens, or the project hasn't moved along, often what will happen is whoever's coming in to develop at the time will come and change it anyway, because things will have changed in the world, and the project that was proposed 12 years ago may not be economically viable. So they're going to have to do something different. They may not be able to get financing for it. That's one kind of category of PUD. The other category of PUD is one it is a master plan community that will take time to build, and it will take time to build out. And so you may be in the 12th year, the 10th year of a PUD that's building out, and some things, the whole project, and the developer's been active the whole time, and rather than the whole project having to change, they're modifying based on a different plan or a different market condition, or a tenant or a property owner that they're going to sell to that has a different concept. And at that time, you're looking at the big picture. What is this PUD? How does it fit into the city's overall plan? How does that one particular change fit into the PUD? And is that the best course of action for the city based on today's standards? And that may have a little bit of history dragging it down, where you're going to be, what can they do now versus what do they want to change it to? I don't know if that answered the question, but.
In a world of limitations and changes, yes, at best it could be answered, yeah.
Yeah,
Things change.
but the city going and changing a zoning that they don't like anymore, that's where the city has to look at, are we taking away uses that property owner is entitled to? And we have new state laws that have strengthened property owner rights. If a city goes and, it's called downzoning, it changes property uses or zoning categories because they don't like the project that's going to go in, the city now has to do an analysis of whether they're going to be taking devaluing the land and have to compensate the property owner for it. So there's a process that has to be gone through. And it's because these statutes come from extreme circumstances. The example given in the bill was a city had a bunch of, I think, automotive type businesses going in and started changing the zoning so those businesses couldn't go in, and the businesses had already invested resources in making that property use come to fruition. And the legislature said, rather than having to go sue the city and go through the courts and see if you're going to win or not, we're going to change the law to make the city have to analyze that change and potentially compensate you if they're going to make that change in zoning district. So that probably highlights even more the importance of the recommendations you're making and the actions the council are taking, because once the zoning is set, and it's going to be hard to change unless the property owner is participating in that process. And that's where the comprehensive plan can be a really good tool. What's our big picture for the city? So, any more questions on the planning part of this? Okay. Now, we'll go to Open Meetings Act, Public Information Act, and then conflicts of interest. So I want to just hit some high points here for you. So you guys are subject to these transparency laws, which are Open Meetings Act and Public Information Act. There's a little information sheet that's Public Information Act and Open Meetings Act at a glance, kind of gives you the high points. The other thing you're going to have to do is you have to take Open Meetings Act training within 90 days of being appointed. So you won't just hear that once, you'll hear it again. It's good to hear these things over and over again. That's how you remember them. The Open Meetings Act, the important thing to remember is the decisions that you make have to be done in a public setting where the public knows what you're going to talk about, has an opportunity to come and participate, watch the discussion, and have the vote be public. So that means where if you have a quorum of the P&Z meeting, so for you that's four, if four of you are meeting, discussing business that comes before you, that has to be at a posted meeting. There has to be an agenda posted at least 72 hours in advance that shows what you're going to talk about. And you have to have that meeting publicly in that location that's shown in the agenda. And if you fail to do that, that's a violation of the Open Meetings Act, and it makes your action voidable, and there's criminal penalties associated with it. It's also against the law to meet in groups of less than a quorum for the purpose of lining up the votes so that when you come to the meeting, you just vote without the discussion. So that's a violation of Open Meetings Act as well. Written communications in whatever form, text, social media, email, those are amongst a quorum or in those smaller groups with the intent of circumventing Open Meetings Act. That is a violation of the Open Meetings Act as well, and it's in writing. So it's, they're there for everybody to see. They can get that with an open records request. So the best practice for a P&Z is to really not to discuss any of the cases with each other outside of the meeting. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, it just keeps you completely compliant with Open Meetings Act, but also, you have the benefit of the discussion with your group here. Everyone's going to have different points of view and ideas and reasons why you have the position you have. And that is best done in the group because everybody benefits from that group discussion, hearing all of that. If you have two or three that are discussing something outside a meeting and that discussion doesn't happen here, you don't get as good of a decision that comes out. The other members don't benefit from that discussion. And so the best is just to, any discussion happens here in the meeting with the group, posted. Staff takes care of posting. You don't have to worry about that part. One other note about social media, that's kind of the wild west of can you violate the Open Meetings Act on a social media? I don't do social media, so I don't know all the mechanics of it. But taking to social media can have an Open Meetings Act issue because we just don't know if 4 of you start commenting on social media about a case, that would be an Open Meetings Act violation. If I'm reading it and just liking things, or I'm a member of the same group, is that an Open Meetings Act violation? It's kind of an unknown, so it's best just to stay off. But there's another reason for that. If you get into if there's a particularly kind of heated case in front of you, and you get on social media and you start advocating one position or another, and you use social media to advocate in that forum, that we see how social media goes. It's kind of back and forth, and people can lose their civility and lose their heads a bit. What you write out there, it's out there forever, and what that could do is undermine the decision you make here. It could undermine, if you're making the decision for the right reason here, but in social media you say something ill-advised in the heat of the moment, it can make it look like you're making it for a decision that's a reason that's improper. So it's just best to not talk about zoning cases on social media. Just again, have the discussion here with your group in this setting. Okay, Public Information Act. The Public Information Act is anything that you put in writing that is related to your role as commission member is public information. That means somebody can submit a request to the city and get a copy of it. And so the bottom line here is, if you don't want to see it out there, something that you wrote, don't write it. That's probably the easiest thing to do. But also be aware that all of your devices, whether they're personal or city, if you write about P&Z business, that's public information. So someone could submit a request to you or to the city and ask for all emails or correspondence or texts about the CUP case, for example, that's on the agenda. And then you'll get a copy of that request and you'll be asked to disclose everything. And that means you have to go through all your personal devices and disclose that. Just because it's on a personal device does not make it private. The city's going to provide you with city emails, and that'll do 2 things. It just kind of, it's good, keeps things separate. So you can, like, my private is private, my public is public. If I get an open records request, then I know it's all going to be here and it's not going to be anyplace else. If someone contacts you on your personal email, say, use my city email. If someone tries to text you, say, use my city email. Just direct everybody towards that. And that will keep it isolated for that. Is that right? Yes.
Do we have a city email? I didn't know that was obtainable for P&Z.
Excuse me. Will Atkinson, for the record, Director of Planning. My microphone's a weird one. Looks like a brand new one. Don't know how to use it. We are in the process of getting those from IT, actually. So there's some information that I need from them before I hand them off to y'all. So.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
The other thing is that there are records retention laws. You have to keep public records for a certain period of time, and it extends to your private devices and emails. And the requirement is, if you have it on your private device, you have to keep it for the period of time and in the same manner that the city would. And so transfer that burden to the city. That's the best way to do that. Because if you don't, there's consequences for not doing that. And again, when there's an open records request that's made, the city secretary and IT can just pull the records for you if you're strictly using your city email, and that takes burden off of you because you're already volunteers. You're spending your time here. You're volunteering your time here. Having to add additional time for responding to Public Information Act requests, you can avoid that by using that city email, and then the city can take care of pulling records when needed for open records requests. Any questions on that? Okay. Just on conflicts of interest, you're subject to the city's ethics ordinance. And there's ethics training that happens every once in a while, so that would be something that you should attend when they have it. The high points there, they're the common sense things, which is there's a state law and then there's the city's ethics ordinance, and then there's kind of the anti-corruption laws that are, like bribery. You can't take something of value in exchange for voting one way or the other. That's the general concept of anti-bribery statutes. So don't do that. Ethics ordinance has something similar, which is don't take a gift or something of benefit from somebody who's got business in front of you or in exchange for your vote. Those are, and that includes a gift to a family member, which is given for the purpose of influencing your votes. Those are prohibited. Advancing a private interest or that of a third party from your vote, that is also prohibited. And so there's a couple of provisions that deal with that. But if there's a matter that comes before you that impacts your own personal property, either because it's actually your property or it's close enough to the particular zoning case that it has a particular economic benefit to you, either positive or negative, then that's something that you should disclose the conflict and recuse yourself. Same for a business. If there's a matter that comes before you that impacts a business from which you receive income or a family member receives income, then you should disclose that and recuse yourself. Because your role here is to make a decision based on what's in the best interest of the public and the city as a whole. If something comes before you that puts a private interest in front of that public interest, whether it's your own economic benefit plus or minus, or you're a family member, there's disclosure and recusal requirements. And the city secretary and the staff have forms that would allow you to make that disclosure, and then you just step off the dais and you don't participate in the vote or the discussion, and then you can come back to the item. So there's no shame in making the disclosure. That's what you're supposed to do. It's great. It's a very good thing to do. And documents compliance. Yes.
Okay. As my role of president of the Waterleaf HOA, okay, if something that comes before us could affect that HOA entity, I probably should recuse myself. Same thing as my role as a Board of Trustees member for the County Line Water District.
It's possible that you should do that. You have to look at each case on case-by-case basis. If you have a question, though, like if you're starting to ask a question, just ask, and we will get you an answer so that you can make a good decision. And if you've got any questions about whether you need to disclose or recuse, or if there's a conflict of interest, always ask. Always err in the side of asking, and then you will get a written response so that you can rely on it and say, I asked and I was told I was fine, or I asked and I was advised to recuse, and then we will lead you through the process to document that you recuse yourself from that. I've got a chart that kind of shows some of the state laws and how those recusals happen, so I can give that to Will to share with y'all. That just kind of details that a little bit more. And I think that's all I had. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, yes. I just had a general question and probably can't be answered here, but it's my understanding nevertheless that you made reference to the situation with the auto dealers, and the state law came in and preempted local decisions and said, no, it's going to be this way. My understanding is that that's happening more and more where there's preemption, and that the development practices or authorities of local governments have been changed quite a bit these last few years. Is that roughly the case?
Yeah, the cities used to be able to regulate building materials, and that's been more severely limited. If you want to, there are certain agricultural and veterinary type businesses that have a lot of protection now in this last legislative session, So that's another example. Having a line of sight on if your decision is taking away uses of property, then the city having to compensate. Those are kind of the categories of statutes that have been passed that impact the city's planning authority. That gets looked at when something comes before you, or if the city has to enforce an ordinance, then you don't typically see that part of it, but that gets analyzed whether they can still enforce the ordinance. When they bring forward amendments, that gets analyzed before the amendment gets to you. It may get, if the question comes up, please feel free to ask questions and satisfy yourself that all that is being addressed whenever you get an amendment before you, because there's always a different way to look at things. And so it helps to have input from community, from P&Z, so that we can make sure we're looking at it from all angles, and maybe there's something that needs to be addressed a little bit differently than what is before you. But yes, so the answer is yes. And probably more than what I just mentioned also, but you may run into those from time to time. Okay, and just feel free to ask questions whenever you need to and as you serve as commissioners, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Paige. It's very helpful.
Can we get a copy of the slide presentation emailed to us? Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 6, consent. Item 6A is a replat of Lot 1, Panther Park, Section 2, sub -23-0310, 1.853 acres, 2 lots located at 870 Veterans Drive. Staff proposal is to approve the replat as the document is compliant. Do you have a presentation for this item?
Sorry.
Oh, you're just leaving, Jason? Okay.
Will Atkinson, Planning Director for the record. Both of these items are on consent, so if y'all are wanting to discuss one or more items, then it does need to be pulled from consent to do so.
Okay, so we just go straight to vote, in other words.
Yeah, you can make a motion to approve both items if you don't wish to discuss it.
If I could pull item A.
6A,
Yep.
and you wish to have it tabled for future?
No, I just have a quick question about it.
Okay,
Okay, and
Yep.
that is, I'm assuming from looking at the plat drawing, the driveway from Veterans Drive to Lot 1A is also shared with 2A, correct?
Will Atkinson for the record. That is correct.
Okay.
Per our subdivision code and also general practices, we coordinate with developers to make sure that, or commercial developers, that they have interparcel access off the public right-of-way.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to confirm that.
okay, we need a motion to approve this item. Can I have somebody make a motion?
Motion to approve item 6A.
Second.
Okay, so the item has been, to approve has been nominated by Commissioner Stiegel and seconded by Commissioner Shields. Any discussion on the matter? Anything else? Okay, we'll go to a vote. All in favor of the approval, say aye.
Aye.
All against, say nay. The vote is unanimous, and the item is approved. The next consent item is item 6B, the Plum Creek Brick and Mortar Commercial Block A, final plat, sub -23-0313, 4.7678 acres, 1 commercial lot located at the intersection of FM 1626 and Kohler's Crossing. The staff recommendation is to approve this final plat. We'll need a motion to approve the item. Do we have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay.
And I'll second.
So Commissioner Mata has made a motion to approve and seconded by Commissioner Steels. Do we have any discussion on the matter? Okay, we'll go to a vote then. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All against, say nay. And the ayes have it. We are unanimous. Motion carries. We're going to move on to item 7, consider and possible action. Item 7A, consider a request to construct an approximately 11,530 square foot retail shell building located at 1050 Bunton Creek Road within the Goforth Road overlay. Bunton Retail Center conditional use permit CUP-23-0086. Staff has found the request to be compliant with the Goforth Road overlay and recommends approval. Kayla, you have a presentation for this item?
Yes, I do. Kayla Sharp, City Planner for the record. So tonight we have a conditional use permit for the property located at 1050 Bunton Creek Road. This one is in the Goforth Road overlay. So at Bunton Creek Road and Goforth Road, it's approximately 11,500 square feet, and it'll be a retail shell building. The materials consist primarily of stone veneer and stucco, and then there's some appropriate architectural details to accent the building. Let's see, and then this is the overlay map showing that it's in the Goforth Road overlay. I know it's kind of hard to see. So we have some renderings for you. And then this one is a little bit different than the I-35 overlay. This one does not have any sort of building material requirements or anything like that. So this one is compliant and we recommend approval. And then here's those drawings as well. And then site plan and the landscape plan. Any questions for staff?
Yes, I have a question. The shrubbery in the back of the building, best I could tell, having read the list of trees and shrubs, should generally block the view of the back of the building for the residential neighborhood behind it. Is that the case?
Yes. It's generally a landscape buffer against residential. So this site plan was found to be compliant with the regulations late 2021. So this was approved a while ago.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, I'd like a motion on this item. Anybody like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve?
Commissioner Mata, thank you. A second?
I'll go ahead and second.
Okay. And Commissioner Shields is seconding this motion. Any discussion on that? I did go and have a look at the property. I think it's appropriate use for it. Aligns with our comprehensive plan and draft comprehensive plan in that it's infill and it doesn't require any additional structures and so forth. So seems appropriate and well laid out. Any other discussion on this? Okay, let's go to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All against, say nay. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to the next item, item 8, general discussion. Item 8A, discussion regarding the Planning and Zoning Commission request for future agenda items. Does the commission have any items to be requested? So for new members, that's a point at which you can ask for items to be put on the agenda in a future time. It goes on a list that we have, and then we curate the list with the planning department and decide when to add things. Anybody have any items they would wish to add at this time? Okay, let's move on to item 9. Item 9, staff report. Item 9A, staff report. Does staff have a report tonight for the commission?
Yes, Will Atkinson, Planning Director for the record. First and foremost, welcome new commissioners. We have Tracy Shield in seat 5 and Daniel Serrato in seat 7. And Tracy has been involved with the city for a long time. She was a former city council member. She's on the Waterleaf board, HOA board, County Line board, as she had stated. Mr. Serrato, I'm going to apologize, 'cause I'm probably going to get it wrong. You moved from Houston 2 years ago?
That's correct.
About?
But born and raised in Austin.
Born and raised in Austin? Okay. And he has a really strong interest in wanting to know how development happens in Texas. He's been watching meetings. He has a mentor out of, I think, Wyoming.
Correct.
And so we're excited to have a fully staffed P&Z ward, and excited to have y'all learn and have a vested hand in what's happening here in town. Number 2, at council last week, they gave direction for staff to start working together with y'all, the P&Z Commission, to start doing some research and workshops into ways to improve our water conservation policies and regulations, and maybe working on some programs to put together. If you want a little bit more detailed direction based on the conversation, there is a recording online for the City of Kyle website under the City Council video. It's item number 33 on the 9-5 agenda. So we will be working on getting a workshop item here shortly in one of the upcoming meetings, and also showing you what our current landscape code is that was just updated, and so we can start having those discussions. And then I think Jason has one more thing for us.
Yes, thank you. Jason Lutz, Senior Planner for the record. I just wanted to update y'all on the Gregg Gardens subdivision plat. I'd gotten an email questioning the access of some townhomes on an alley. It was a 20-foot alley. So we did some research on that one. There's a couple of quirks in our code. They actually do allow a townhome product to have frontage along an alley if it is within a PUD. It's very random kind of section of code. I can tell you from a staff perspective, we're probably not a big fan of that. So as we kind of make some notes on things we want to change, that's probably one of them that we want to do. So that just kind of heads up on that. We did look into that. We did actually reach out to the developer to see if there was an option to maybe widen that. At this point, they were already mobilizing for construction and all this plans. So we did try and kind of bring that back and just kind of discuss our concerns. But we did find that section of code that allows that.
So that might be something we look at in the near future about changing, because if they knew that, other people know it too.
Yes, and there's several of sections of code that will most likely need to be updated in the subdivision ordinance as we start working through tweaks to our zoning ordinance, just to make sure that those are married up. And not just planning related, there'll be probably we'll be looking at street cross sections, adding some of those. There's been some concerns about the private streets with fire access, so we want to kind of develop some standards. That way, if we do have some streets that are no parking because it's 20 foot, that we beef up the zoning code to require additional off-street parking in the area to accommodate the lack of on-street parking. So just, like I said, wanted to follow up on that one because you raised that question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, item 10, adjournment. Having no further business, the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission is adjourned.